The old, rugged cross. A bloodied beam of wood. A social symbol of shame. This barbaric practice of crucifixion. Humiliating. Agonizing. A graphic display of punishment reserved for the worst of offenders. The cross was the epitome of scorn and rejection. In the sacred scriptures, the gospel writers give account of one crucifixion that changed everything. Beaten, bruised, the nails in his hands, the spear in his side, his last breath. Darkness. Yet somehow on that day, in a glorious twist of irony, this brutal practice of crucifixion became the source of eternal hope. Through his sacrifice, Jesus didn't just change historic perception of the cross. He turned it on its head. From scandal to grace, from condemned to forgiven, from prisoner to pardoned, from death to life. What once was seen as the ultimate form of humiliation has become the ultimate display of amazing love. Today, we remember what Jesus accomplished through the cross. We take hope in his resurrection. We celebrate his victory over death and the grave forever. Because he lives, we live.
Good morning, guys. I want to welcome you all to our online service again this morning. With the virus, everything's still shut down, but we miss you, and I just pray that you guys are all taking care. Everybody's doing well. We're going to switch the roles a little bit this morning, and Dewey's going to join me this morning. So, we're just excited to worship with you guys, and we pray that you guys are all doing well and staying safe. The head that once was crowned with thorns is crowned with glory now. The Savior knelt to wash our feet. Now at his feet we bow. He's now alive in me. body there would not remain. Our God has robbed the grave. Our God has robbed the grave. Yes, He has. Yes, He has. Sing your name, your name, your name is victory. All praise will rise to Christ our King. Your name is victory. All praise will rise to Christ our King. Your name is victory. All praise will rise to Christ our King. Your name is victory. All praise will rise to Christ our King. Alone in my sorrow and dead in my sin, lost without hope, no place to begin. Your love made a way and let mercy come in. When death was arrested and my life began, now ash was redeemed, only beauty remained. My orphan heart was given a name. My mourning grew quiet and my feet rose to dance. When death was arrested and my life began. Oh, your grace, so free, washes over me. You have made me new, now life begins with you. It's your endless love pouring down on us. You have made me new, now life begins with you. Released from my chains, I'm a prisoner no more. My shame was a ransom you faithfully bore. He came to my death and he called me his friend. When death was arrested, my life began. Oh, your grace, so free, washes over
Good morning to all of you. Welcome to all of you that are online this morning and with us. That was some really good worship. So Dewey, Kobe, thank you. Incredible worship time together. It is a wonderful Easter morning. And I am so excited because it's Easter. And Easter is an exciting celebration. I wish you could be here. I wish we could be together. That would really be exciting. But it's a wonderful morning anyway. And I'm just excited to celebrate Easter with you. This morning, we are simply going to celebrate the fact that Jesus rose from the dead, and he's alive now. We're going to celebrate that together. On Friday evening, if you remember online, we together walked through a little bit of the journey of Jesus. I encouraged you some of the heartbeat, the passion that Jesus shared with his closest followers on Friday evening, and we did that on Friday evening, and then he shared that with his followers. He broke bread with them. He drank juice, wine with them, simply showing them his heart, his intention. And through that journey that Jesus walked, he ended on the cross, dead, giving us our salvation, paying the ultimate price. He went to the cross as a sacrifice for our punishment, our crimes, things he never committed. And that's where he gave his entire life. Now, this morning, what I want us to do more than anything, I want us to honor him. I want us to bring glory to him. I want to lift high the name of Jesus because he deserves our focus. He deserves our honor. He deserves all of the praise, all of the worship. I think Paul puts it very well. Paul, in one of his writings, in his letter to the Hebrews, in Hebrews chapter 12, this is what Paul says. I love it. Paul says, Hebrews chapter 12, verse 2, he says, let us fix our eyes on Jesus. So focusing on Jesus, the author, and Jesus actually is very much the author, right? He's like the foundation of our faith. He's what really our Christian life is about. He's why I'm excited to be part of God's family. It's all because of Jesus. And Paul says, let us fix our eyes on Jesus. He is the author and the perfecter. He really does perfect it. Maybe that's what he's doing now through this whole crisis. But he's the author and perfecter of our faith. Now listen to what he says. Who for the joy set before him. What's he mean by that? What Paul means is Jesus had this incredible amount of excitement and joy of what the new kingdom could be like. Knowing that you and I would be part of that kingdom. And so Jesus had this incredible amount of joy. And Paul says, for the joy that was set before him, endured the cross, scorning its shame, and sat down at the right hand of the throne of God. That's what Jesus did. And that scorn of shame, that journey to the cross, is what we commemorated, what we celebrated on Friday night. But I'm so excited that it didn't end there. Because Jesus being the author and the perfecter of our faith, because he is the Son of God, and he did not stay dead, has the ultimate power, authority to do anything. And I want to read this occurrence. I want to read this power that was manifested, this crazy, incredible time of history that we as believers all celebrate. I want to read this together in Matthew chapter 28. Incredible story. Here's how Matthew records it. He says, after the Sabbath, at the dawn of the first day of the week, a Sunday, just like this morning, Mary Magdalene and the other Mary went to look at the tomb. So they came to the tomb, and sometime, John records it that it happened before they got there, but somehow there was this huge earthquake. The stone rolled away and became empty. And Jesus was no longer in it. And it says here there was a violent earthquake. An angel of the Lord came down from heaven, and going to the tomb, he rolled back the stone and he sat on it. Now, either the tombstone or some kind of stone, it says he just sat down, like there's power over this. His appearance was like lightning. His clothes were white as snow. The guards were so afraid of him. So there had still been guards around the tomb up until this point. And the guards were so afraid of him that they shook and became like dead men. The angel said to the woman, so the women come to the tomb, and the angel says, do not be afraid, for I know that you're looking for Jesus who was crucified. Guess what? He is not here. He is risen, just as he said. Come and see the place where he lay. So the angel wanted her to look in the tomb and see that it was empty. And then the angel says, go quickly and tell his disciples, he's risen from the dead, and he's going ahead of you into Galilee. And there you will see him. Verse 8, the women hurried away from the tomb, afraid. They were like scared out of their wits, like what just happened here? And yet they were filled with joy. And they ran to tell his disciples. Suddenly, listen to this is incredible. Suddenly Jesus met them. Greetings, he said. They came to him and they clasped his feet and they worshiped him like you and I need to do this morning. And Jesus said to them, do not be afraid. Go and tell my brothers in Galilee that they will see me. And it says the women were on their way. Some of the guards went into the city and reported to the chief priests, to the Pharisees, to the rulers, everything that had happened. And when the chief priests, when the rulers had met with the elders, they devised a plan. And basically, here's what they devised. They said, listen, we want you to tell people that somehow his disciples, his team came and overtook you, and they took the stone away, and they stole his body. And Matthew just has a note in here. As he records it, he says this story is still widely circulated. Now, you and I this morning, we know the story of someone coming and stealing his body is not true. We believe and we know that Jesus, after dying on the cross, he was dead in the grave, but then he was dead no more. And he's now alive and he's real. John records this a little bit differently, or from a different angle. John records it that the ladies came and they saw the empty tomb and they spoke with Jesus, as Matthew recorded. They spoke with Jesus. At first they thought he was a gardener, but then they spoke with him. And then it says they went and they told the disciples, they said, listen, we want you to know that the tomb is empty. Jesus is no longer dead. And I love this part of the story. John records this. He says him and Peter ran. So wherever they are, they ran to the tomb looking inside. And they found nothing but empty garments. Nothing except the clothes that Jesus had on. He was no longer in there. What overwhelming relief. I mean, imagine the excitement. 3 days earlier, or 2.5 days earlier, the disciples had walked through this crazy emotional journey. Intense pain emotionally of seeing the one they loved, of seeing Jesus like you and I celebrated on Friday night, seeing him hang on the cross dead. And now they knew he wasn't dead. Imagine the relief. Imagine the excitement. This morning, here's what I'm excited about. You and I get to enjoy the same relief. We get to enjoy the same excitement. Not only for the fact that Jesus is alive, but for the display of his power. I mean, this shows the fact that Jesus did not stay dead. The fact that Jesus had the power, the authority to walk through that, what we commemorated on Friday night. That time of love and pouring out his grace and pouring out his love on the cross so that we could all be saved. The fact that he walked through that, but then had the authority to walk through and not stay in the grave. And yet he walked through and showed that ultimate sacrifice, shared his heart passions. And now with the event on the morning where he rose from the dead, he showed that utmost power. Here's what I believe. I believe this morning, if Jesus overcame death, which I am absolutely positively sure that that is the case, Jesus rose from the dead, and I hope you believe with me this morning. I hope you have that solid faith. That's what we celebrate. If he overcame death, he can. This morning, I want you to think about this. If he overcame death, he can overcome anything and everything in your life. Everything. This morning, more than anything, I want us to rejoice that he has that kind of power. I want us to rejoice in that kind of authority that he has. Jesus repeatedly asked his believers, before all of this went down, before he went to the cross, before he went into the grave and then defeated death and rose again, he repeatedly asked his followers to believe. He wanted them to believe. This morning, more than anything, I want you, I beg you, I need you to believe. God is bigger than anything. His son, Jesus Christ, overcame death. Jesus is bigger than anything, and he's bigger than the journey you're walking through right now. He's bigger than whatever thoughts have been trying to intrude into your mind this morning since you woke up. This too shall pass. He's bigger than COVID-19. He's bigger than any financial stress. He's bigger than any kind of politics. He's bigger than any kind of evil conspiracy things that you think may or may not be happening. Jesus is bigger. He's stronger. Just like he overcame death, he can overcome anything. Paul explains this so well also in Corinthians, a letter he wrote to the church in Corinth. Some of you know this as Corinthians chapter 15. In the beginning of the chapter, Paul walks through this in Corinthians chapter 13. He walks through this. In the beginning of the chapter, he says, I want to remind you of the gospel. And that's my intent this morning. So we're celebrating that Jesus rose from the dead. I want to remind you of the gospel, man. Like Jesus is stronger. Jesus is more powerful. Jesus has got this. And that's what Paul says. He says, I want to remind you of the gospel. And he walks through that first part of the chapter saying that Jesus truly did hang on the cross and he died. And he said Jesus truly was in the grave. And then Jesus truly had the power over death. And then he says these words, I love it. This is what Paul says in verse 51. He says, listen, I tell you a mystery. We will not all sleep, but we will all be changed. How? By the power of Jesus. He says in verse 52, in a flash, in the twinkle of an eye, at the last trumpet. I don't really know what he means when that's going to happen, but at the last trumpet, the trumpet will sound, the dead will be raised imperishable, and we will be changed. And look what he says in verse 54. He says, death has been swallowed up in victory. This is what Jesus did, and he still does it. Death has been swallowed up in victory. Where, O death, is your victory? Where, O death, is your sting? And look what he says in verse 56. The sting of death is sin. So in other words, it's something we don't need to worry about. It's overcome by Jesus Christ. And the power of sin is the law, but thanks be to God. Listen to this. Thanks be to God, who's he? Jesus gives us the victory. He gives us the victory. Verse 58 and verse 58, Paul says this. He says, therefore, my dear brothers, stand firm. Let nothing move you. We need that right now. We're celebrating Easter. We're celebrating the fact that Jesus rose from the dead. We're celebrating the fact that he has ultimate power. This is what Paul's telling us. He says, listen, let nothing move you. No fear factor, no anxiety, no worry, no COVID-19. No kind of evil connections, no kind of politics. Let nothing move you. Always give yourself fully to the work of the Lord because you know that what you do for Jesus is worth more than anything. I want you to know this morning that Jesus has got this. Jesus rose from the dead. That celebration we did Friday night, that Jesus died on the cross for our salvation. He didn't stay dead. He rose from the grave. He came out of there. He's fully alive. And now he's walking with us. Today, I want you to rejoice. Today, I want you to stand firm. Today, I want you to be excited that you belong to the family of God. And today, I beg you to keep your eyes on Jesus Christ. He's the ultimate power. He's the ultimate authority. And by our knowledge and our faith, and who he is, that will give us substance. That will give us courage. That will help us to keep walking on no matter what this week or next week or this year holds. Because we focus on Jesus. who has the power over death, who rose from the grave. This is what we celebrate this morning. Happy Easter to each of you. I'm so glad we could connect in a little way, this kind of way. I encourage you to reach out to someone around you today. It's a wonderful Easter day. It's a time when families should connect. Spiritual family, the Christian family should connect, should encourage each other, should build each other up. So connect with somebody today. If you don't have anyone to connect with, call me, text me. Let's together worship Jesus Christ. He overcame death. He's worthy of all of our worship, all of our power. May God bless you today. Happy Easter.